Oh, there we go. Okay, hello everyone. Good morning to those who are on the West Coast, and it is still morning here in Ontario. Welcome to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. My name is Melissa. I'm your host for today, and I am visiting you out of Toronto. And joining us today, we have Rachel. She works at OceanWise Canada, and she is the director of online programs. And today she's going to tell us all about otters and urchins and the balance of the ocean. So I hope you guys have some great questions ready for her. We'll do an introduction of the classrooms right before we ask some questions. But for now, I'll hand it over to you, Rachel. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. So hello, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful morning so far. As Melissa said, my name is Rachel. I'm actually the coordinator for online learning. But I do get to work a lot with digital technology, and Skyping with you guys this morning is one of those examples. And so we're going to talk today about food chains and why they're important and why humans need to be a part of those food chains as well. So I'm going to share my screen because I've got some pictures to show you. And you're going to see Melissa's face for just a moment, and then I'll bring up my slides here. So this is where I'm located. We're in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada. And so I'm circled there, nice down in the corner. And we're located in the Vancouver Aquarium in Stanley Park, which is on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations people, which means we are right in the center of a wonderful temperate rainforest, both above land and also under the waves as well. When you start to go below the waves of West Coast, we are host to some very amazing underwater plants. So this is kind of what our coastal ecosystems look like on the cold Pacific Ocean. And when you get under the waves, you see this entire new world. It's just like going into space, but on our own planet, because you are entering into this entirely different world, which is personally why I love the ocean so much. And underneath those waves is home to lots of different types of plants and animals. Most famously, we have kelp. Kelp is a really amazing algae. So it is very much like a plant. It produces oxygen just like the trees on land using photosynthesis. And they can grow up to be 30 feet tall. So if you look up to the roof of your classroom, classrooms are usually about 10 feet. So imagine 3 classrooms stacked on top of each other. That's how tall kelp can grow. And it creates this wonderful home for animals under the water, just like our forests do on land. It gives us oxygen. So I'd like everyone to take a nice deep breath in. Awesome. So you just breathed in ocean air. Over half of the air we breathe on land comes from plants like kelp. So already humans really need to be thankful for the ocean because it gives us these vital things we have to have in order to survive. So it's this amazing home that we have on the west coast of Canada. But when you dive in British Columbia, I've got a video here, you'll notice that we don't see kelp, which is very interesting. I've just talked about how the west coast is supposed to be covered with these amazing plants that are home, that are food, that are oxygen for animals. And yet when you go scuba diving in Vancouver, you don't see a lot of kelp. Instead, we've got these rocky reefs. Those are some sea anemones, the cauliflower looking things, some wonderful rockfish there, but no kelp. And so today I'm going to tell you the story of why we don't have kelp in BC and why humans have a part to play in that as well. And it all comes down to this wonderful creature here. If you hold up a fist, if you close your fist and hold it up, that is about the size of this creature here. It's called a sea urchin. It does look lovely and spiky, and it's what we call an invertebrate, which means it has no bones. So if you take a moment and feel the back of your neck, you'll feel that there's bumps back there. That's your spine. And these invertebrates have none of that. They have no bones. So they're entirely made up of a shell, kind of like a crab, underneath all of those spikes. And in addition to those spikes, they've got what I like to call these, this is a superpower in my opinion, they've got tube feet. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these tentacle-looking things called tube feet. And they're wonderful. They've got those little suction cups at the end, and they help the sea urchins crawl along the bottom of the ocean. So they can go sideways, upside down, over rocks, under rocks. You'll find them when you go, if you ever get to go beachcombing on the west coast of the country in North America, you might even be able to find some of these hidden under rocks. So they're a really cool creature. When we go diving, they like to congregate together. So this is diving off of the coast of northern British Columbia, where we see tons and tons of red sea urchins. Those previous ones were purple sea urchins. These ones are red sea urchins. Scientists aren't always very creative when it comes to naming animals, but this serves its purpose. So you can see these wonderful little spiky creatures hanging out around. And they're part of a group of animals called Echinodermata. So does anyone, kind of just with a nod of your head, does anyone recognize some of these animals? Maybe a few people there. We've got a sea star, and we've got a sand dollar, and a sea cucumber, and sea urchins. All of these animals are related to each other. They're in a group called Echinodermata. So you find them pretty much all the way up from Alaska down to Mexico. And they're really cool because they all have those tube feet, those tentacle things to help them move around. But we're talking about sea urchins in particular because I like to call them the garbage disposals of the ocean. They will eat pretty much anything that gets in their path. And one of their favorite foods is kelp. So kelp is really, really strong. It sticks to the rocks. But sea urchins have these amazing teeth. They've got 5 teeth that are able to chew right through the kelp. So they love to eat kelp when they're able to get a handle on it. So we started with kelp at the bottom of the food chain, and now we've got sea urchins, which means that there has to be some kind of top predator going after sea urchins. So start thinking of some ideas. What could possibly eat sea urchins? And let's see if I've got it here. There they are, these wonderful, adorable little animals called sea otters. Now, if you go back a couple hundred years, Vancouver had lots of sea otters. And these sea otters are adorable. They love sea urchins as well. It's one of their favorite foods. But sea urchins are very difficult to get into because of that really nice, spiky, hard exterior. So how do the sea otters manage to get into these really spiky balls? Well, they do have nice sharp teeth, but they do have a couple other methods as well. In this video that I'm going to show you, we have Christy, who's one of our senior mammal trainers at the aquarium. And at the aquarium, we actually have 6 rescued, non-releasable sea otters. And here they are enjoying one of their favorite treats.
Natural otter behavior, right there, banging it on the ground to crack it open. That's something they would do out in the wild with their harder food items like mussels and clams and crab and urchins and things like that. They actually can either do one of 2 ways. They can put a rock on their chest and bang it against the rock, or they'll put the food on their chest and bang the rock against their chest.
Okay. To get to the treat, to get to the yummy part. Look at this.
So sea otters have a wonderful ability to be able to break open their food using rocks. And because their fur is so thick and dense and loose on their bodies, they're actually able to hide things in their fur. They sort of make a pocket, mostly in their armpit. So I like everybody, I'm going to stop sharing for a second here. I'd like everybody to pretend that you're a sea otter, and sea otters live their entire lives on their back. So if you kind of like lie back for a moment, imagine that you're floating in the water, but you've got to get a sea urchin. So you've got to dive down and get your sea urchin. And you got to come back up. You've got your sea urchin. So what they'll do is they'll use their tummies as a dinner plate. Got your sea urchin, and you have to crack open your sea urchin. So you're going to take your favorite rock, which you've got hidden in your armpit. You're going to take out your favorite rock, and then you're going to crack. Oh, it's awesome. And you're going to eat all of the wonderful goodness inside. So sea otters will carry around a favorite rock that they can use to crack open their food, eat it all, and then they have to spend the rest of the day cleaning. They have to clean all of their fur because it is one of the densest fur in the entire animal kingdom. You take your thumb, and you put your thumb on your arm. If you were touching a sea otter has the same amount of hair under your thumb that's on your entire head. So on just that little circle of a sea otter has the same number of hairs as your entire head. Has anyone tried to count the number of hairs on their head before? It's very, very difficult to do. There are a lot of hair on our head, and you can find it just under that one little spot. So sea otters have one of the densest furs out of the entire animals in the world. And because of that, humans 100 years ago, when we didn't have jackets, we used sea otter fur as a way to stay warm. We hunted sea otters, and we used their fur as a way to make sure that we could stay alive when we faced these cold winters. Now, this is where that story comes back into play when we're looking at the urchin, otter, and kelp story. Urchins help to eat dead things in the ecosystem because, like I said, they eat everything. So they eat the dead things, which is super helpful. But then they also eat the kelp. The sea otters eat the urchins. And the kelp, in turn, provides a home for the otters and the urchins. And the otters will tie their babies in the kelp so they don't float away. They'll use it for oxygen. It serves a lot of purpose. And you've got this wonderful cycle that's working together to make sure that everybody is safe and happy and healthy. But enter in humans and not understanding how the ocean works. And 100 years ago, we hunted sea otters for their fur, and we took too much. So what happened in Vancouver is that these humans hunted sea otters to extinction in the local area. So if we look at our wonderful food chain here, we've got our urchin, otter, kelp. And what do you think? I'm going to ask you for a second, in a whisper to your neighbor, take a guess at what you think is going to happen. If humans were to take out the sea otter, what do you think happens next? Because now we've ruined that balance. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Whisper to your neighbor. What do you think is going to happen next?
Saw a video on our last group. What happened in the water? Talk to your neighbor.
All right, awesome. I hear some really good discussion going on. We'll meet you guys one more time. Awesome. All right, so that was some really good. I heard some excellent whispers going on, and I think I heard it from a couple people. When the sea otters are not there to help control the sea urchins, there's nothing stopping them, and all of a sudden, we get tons and tons of urchins, but there's nothing stopping them from eating everything in their path, including the kelp. And so this is what we saw happen in Vancouver hundreds of years ago when the fur trade was around, is that because humans took way too much, and because we eliminated sea otters from the ecosystem, the sea urchins took over and ate the entire forest that we used to have off of our coast. And then the sea urchins left as well because they didn't have any food. And so this balance is really important, and humans have a part to play in it too, because we rely on the ocean for lots of different things, for our oxygen, for our food, for our resources, even just for fun. If anyone likes to go swimming, if you like to go boating, if you've ever ordered something from Amazon, that has come to you from across the ocean. So humans are just as much a part of this ecosystem as these food chains as the animals that you see as well. And the same goes for your local ecosystem too, whether you're on a coast or a lake, or if you're in the prairies. There are food chains all around, and because we share these homes with the animals, humans have a part to play in it as well. So what happened after that is that humans realized what they had done. They realized that they had taken too much and they weren't being sustainable. And so once you realize the problem, they were able to make policy, make laws that said they couldn't hunt sea otters. They protected sea otters from being hunted. And then they were able to actually bring down sea otters from Alaska to repopulate the area. It kind of worked. So because so much damage was done, sea otters were not able to really stick into Vancouver anymore. You do find them on Vancouver Island, however. So they're still there. We now have a somewhat healthy ecosystem, but there's lots of other problems that are facing the ocean too. And humans, just like us, have a really big part to play. So I encourage you to go out and find your local food chains, find out which animals are interacting with each other in where you live, and see how you might have an effect on that as well. Because as soon as we become curious about the ocean and about the ecosystems around us, the better we can understand it and the more we can do to actually make a difference. And there's lots that we can do as well. So that's my food chain story from where I live. But now we've got lots of time for some questions. We got a whole 15 minutes for questions. And so I'd like to know if you have any questions for me as well about these animals or about the ocean as a whole.
Okay, thanks so much, Rachel. Classrooms, I think I'll just go down my list. That makes it nice and easy. So Miss Thiessen's class, joining us from Surrey, BC. Do you guys have any questions?
Anybody have a question? Alyssa, what's your question? Hurry up. Okay, Christy. The kids were wondering, why do the sea urchins have spikes? What does it do for them?
That's a really good question. All right, think for yourself for a moment. If you were a tiny little animal in the ocean, why would you want spikes? Think about it for a second. Why would you want spikes? I see some good suggestions. Let's get one of the students to guess. Why would you want spikes if you were a tiny little animal?
Rabina, why would you want spikes? So animals think you're big and tough. Anybody else have an idea? Avnor? For protection, so that the bigger animals don't eat you.
I think those are some really good ideas. So you look big and scary. You're really sharp to bite into. Those are all really good ideas. And that's what scientists have observed as well. We think that the spikes are probably for protection to make sure they stay safe. And it's really good camouflage because they're so dark. It's hard to find them on the bottom of the ocean. So that's a really good question, and I like your observations. Nicely done.
Thanks, Miss Thiessen's class. Okay, let's go to Miss Gert Harry's class. I hope I said your name right. You guys are joining us from Brampton, Ontario.
What is the most the most unique species in the world?
What is the most
endangered species?
Oh, endangered species. That depends on what you mean by unique, because everybody finds uniqueness a little bit different. So what's special to one person might be different for somebody else. There's lots of endangered animals, unfortunately. I think the ones that we should be looking at are those invertebrates, that are those little tiny animals that sometimes get forgotten. So there's lots of whales, and there's also quite a few seals that are endangered, and they're really cute. But unless we have their food source, like salmon, for example, if salmon is suffering, then all of those bigger, cute animals suffer as well. So when looking at endangered animals, I like to focus on the small animals, and I encourage you to go and explore some of those species, because that's where you're going to find the ones that actually support all the other animals in the ecosystem. So little fish, herring actually are doing pretty well, but they were at risk a while ago. I don't know the full list off the top of my head, but looking at those small animals tend to find some really unique and cool and bizarre animals that no one actually really knows much about. So those are the ones to check out.
Awesome. Great question. Thank you so much. Okay, how about Miss Quinn's class?
Okay, does anyone have a question they want to ask?
From Cambridge, Ontario.
So we're wondering if the spikes on the sea urchins are poisonous.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Sometimes, yes. So one thing I'll teach you before we do that is there's a difference between poisonous and venomous. And this is how you can impress your friends. Poisonous means you actually have to eat something. So if you were to lick a frog, for example, you would be poisoned because you've ingested it, you've eaten it. Venomous means that they've actually stung you. So if you think of bumblebees or jellyfish, and yes, some species of sea urchins can be venomous. So if you step on them, those toxins definitely can hurt you. Those tend to be found in tropical areas, so we don't have that really in cold water ecosystems. But the biggest danger with sea urchins is when you actually just step on them, because the spines can come out and they can get stuck on your foot, and it's like a really, really painful, bad splinter. speaking from experience. It's not fun. So be careful watching where you walk when you go to the beach, any beach. It's always really important.
Wow, that's some good advice. Awesome. Thank you guys from Miss Quinn's class. Miss Pearson's class in Calgary. Do you guys have any questions?
How many species are there for sea urchins?
That's a really good question. We see them all around the world. So I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's a lot of them. So there's around 200 different species of sea urchins, anywhere from, again, the West Coast to tropics, Caribbean, over 200 different types of sea urchins.
That's so funny.
Awesome, great question. Okay, we're on to Miss Windover's class in Orangeville.
Nolan, where did the Megalodon come from?
Ooh, that's a fun question. Where did Megalodon come from? So Megalodon, for those who may not know, is the prehistoric shark that we believe to be extinct as of a couple 100 million years ago. And Megalodon essentially is like the great grandfather of other sharks. So that's why we don't believe it's around today. It exists millions of years ago when fish kind of just became fish. What's interesting about Megalodon is they think it's so big because it was chasing after really big prey, and they think that's why blue whales might be so big. So because Megalodon was hunting blue whales, the blue whales began to get bigger and bigger over time to try and be too big, and Megalodon kept getting bigger and bigger to make sure it could actually eat the blue whale. And we call that an arms race, where the two species are kind of both adapting against each other. And that's why Megalodon might have been so massive, because of the blue whale and trying to eat it, which is quite cool.
Thank you.
Awesome, great question, guys. Okay, Miss Larmer's class. You guys are in North Bay, Ontario. Do you have some questions?
Hi, I'm Jordan. Who inspired you to do this? Who inspired you?
Oh, thank you, Jordan. Honestly, kids like you inspire me, because when I was growing up, I was really lucky that I could go to the ocean, and I just got really curious about what I found there, and I started walking around and just looking in tide pools. And so just being able to look around nature around me was really interesting. And then when I found out that I could talk to kids like you about it, that's why I wanted to do it as a job, because I really love the ocean. I get super nerdy about the ocean, and I want to be nerdy with other people about the ocean.
Sounds like a pretty fun job.
Thanks, Jordan.
All right, awesome. So I think we have enough time to give every class one more question. So Miss Larmer's class will come back to you in just a few minutes. Let's go back to Miss Thiessen's class and get your final question.
Renato, question?
Any of
How deep have you been in the ocean?
Oh, thank you for asking. I have my basic scuba certification, so I can go 18 meters or 60 feet. And I have done that, which is very exciting. And I've done that both in cold water and in tropical water in Cuba. So when you get your certification, which I believe you can do as early as 12 or 13 if you've got a parent with you, then you can go, the first level lets you go 60 feet or 18 meters.
Thank you.
Awesome. Maybe we got a whole class of future scuba divers there. Okay, back to Mount Royal Public School, the grade 7 classes. Nice and loud.
Do the sea urchins have any other predator that could have helped balance out the food chain?
Do they have any other predators that could have helped control the population? Yeah, very good question. They do have some other predators, and I'm guessing that the balance was just way too offset by the number of sea otters that were hunted, and that's why I didn't survive. But other predators of the sea urchin, my personal favorite is the wolf eel. It's actually a fish, not an eel, but it has this giant, grumpy-looking face. It looks like a really angry old man. And they are one of the friendliest fish, apparently, when you're a scuba diver, which I have yet to find one in the wild, because that'd be very cool. But they have these giant jaws that are able to crush the sea urchins, just like the sea otters, and humans as well. If you've ever had sushi and you've eaten uni, uni is sea urchin gonads, so the sex organs in the sea urchin, and they're supposed to be delicious. So we are also predators of the sea urchin too.
There you go. We don't always consider humans as predators when you think about ferocious hunters or something like that. So there you go. Awesome. Okay, so next is Miss Quinn's class.
Nice and loud. Nice and loud. Okay, Sophia, go.
How old can a sea urchin be?
How old?
How old can a sea urchin be? That's a very good question, Sophia. And it's also very hard to answer when it comes to invertebrates because they're quite difficult to age them and they get eaten usually before they live out their lifespan. So I don't know the answer for sea urchins specifically, but it depends a lot on the conditions. So for example, the oldest living invertebrate that's been recorded is a sea anemone in the UK, in England, that was 170 something years old. So in theory, if you give them the perfect living conditions, they can live to be hundreds of years old if they don't get eaten first.
Awesome. Great question. Okay, Miss Pearson's class.
Do you have another question?
Yes.
Keep going. You gotta go to the screen. Okay, go ahead, Linda.
Oh, I just noticed I'm next to off.
No, it's on.
Yeah, I just noticed.
When did you think that it was okay that when it was okay to hunt hunt otters?
When did they think it was okay to hunt otters? Okay, so the fur trade of Canada was, I believe, in the 1700s. So that was kind of the time where, oh, sorry, that's not right. It was in the 1500s. So if you're looking at about 600 years ago was when we hunted sea otters. And it's an interesting difference of culture as well, because when we learn from First Nations cultures, this is something that they've been doing up till today because they are very, very careful about what they take from the ecosystem and they use it very appropriately. So back then we didn't have jackets like we do. And so using animal fur is a really good way to stay warm. But when colonizers came into Canada, so people from England and from other countries came in, didn't have that same respect for those animals, and that's why we took too many. So it was about 600 years ago we were hunting sea otters, and since then we've learned, but we still are learning, and we still need to keep being curious and exploring the ocean for that.
Great question, guys. Okay, Miss Windover's class.
Aspen. What does the ogopogo eat?
Ooh. Ogopogo. Are you referring to the sea monster up in the Okanagan of Canada?
Is that what you're referring to? Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. I don't know if the ogopogo exists. If it does exist, I would speculate. So my hypothesis is that it's a freshwater creature and it's probably pretty big to have those kind of rumors. So I'm guessing it probably eats those freshwater fish like trout or whatnot. But I would need to see the teeth to have a better idea. Because if you look at your teeth, you've got really sharp teeth in the front, which is great for shredding like meat. And then you've got flat teeth in the back that are really good for grinding vegetables. So when we see those kind of teeth, we know it's probably an omnivore. They eat both meat and vegetables. So if I could look at the ogopogo's teeth, then I would have a better idea of what it eats. But I'm going to guess probably the fish of the lake.
That was a fun question. Okay, I know we're almost out of time, but we have one more class, Miss Larimer's class. You could ask one more question.
My name's Aria, and I have a two-part question. What's the most common sea urchin, and how potent is the venom?
Ooh, okay, thanks, Aria. So what is the most common sea urchin? In British Columbia, it's the green sea urchin, which are basically like the purple ones, but green, because we're very original with our naming. And then the second question was, how potent is the venom? You definitely should go to the hospital. You're probably going to experience some difficulties of breathing, but I don't have a lot of research done myself on that topic, so I would need to look into it more. If you get stung by anything, it's probably a good idea to go to the hospital if you don't know what it is. That's a good question. I encourage you to go look it up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. In North Bay, thank you. Okay, well, Rachel, I know that you have to get started on your day. You have a busy day ahead of you, but thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all of our classrooms for joining us today. I'm going to turn on everyone's microphone so you can say a big thank you to Rachel.
All right, everybody, we need to say
All right. Thanks. Thank you, Rachel. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day. Keep being curious, everybody.